You walk into a crowded room, a family gathering, or a social event, and you immediately start talking. You raise your voice, you dominate the physical space, and you force everyone in the vicinity to pay attention to your narrative. You think you are projecting undeniable confidence. You believe you are establishing social dominance. But clinical behavioral psychology and ancient Stoic philosophy reveal a catastrophic reality. If you want to understand what your need to talk actually reveals, you must accept that constantly needing to be heard is not a display of psychological strength. It is a primal overcompensation mechanism. It mathematically proves that your central nervous system is dangerously dysregulated. Modern society has completely brainwashed you into believing that the loudest person in the room is the most secure, but the clinical truth is the exact opposite. A loud personality is almost entirely fake. It is a biological trauma response designed to secretly mask profound emotional fragility. Right now, millions of people are desperately exhausting their cognitive bandwidth performing for strangers, completely unaware that true Stoic fortitude relies on mastering the devastating weapon of silence. If you do not understand the exact neurochemical collapse driving your desperate need for validation, you will permanently surrender your internal peace. Today, we are going to clinically dissect the terrifying truth behind your fear of silence, and how true Stoic thinkers use stillness to build an impenetrable cognitive shield. To understand why a compulsive need to speak is mathematically linked to emotional weakness, we must examine the evolutionary biology of the human amygdala alongside the foundational principles of Stoicism. For thousands of years, ancient Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius understood that true power is entirely internally generated. It absolutely never requires external applause. Biologically, when a highly regulated, emotionally intelligent individual enters an unpredictable environment, their nervous system detects safety from within. They have absolutely nothing to prove to the tribe. They can sit in complete, unbroken silence because their core identity is not tethered to the real-time reactions of other people. However, when a fragile individual feels subconsciously threatened, out of place, or insecure, their weak nervous system deploys a verbal flight response. Instead of physically running away, you start talking. You speak louder than everyone else, you constantly interrupt, and you aggressively try to control the emotional temperature of the room. You are executing a hypervigilant trauma response known in clinical psychology as fawning. You are desperately attempting to manipulate the environment into validating your existence because your ego is far too fragile to self-soothe in the silence. Listen to me very carefully, because the neuroplastic window to reverse this severe biological leakage of power is closing much faster than you realize. Every single time you rely on this fake, loud persona to mask your internal social anxiety, your brain physically prunes the neural pathways required for genuine Stoic composure and baseline emotional regulation. The psychological decay of your nervous system compounds hour by hour. If you look away or close this video right now, you are consciously choosing to remain a voluntary slave to your own fragile biology, guaranteeing that your deepest insecurities will eventually be exposed and used against you in social dynamics. You must understand the clinical mechanics of this cognitive failure today before your self-respect is irreversibly destroyed. How does constant talking destroy emotional regulation? Let us clinically dissect what actually happens to your internal neurochemistry when you fundamentally refuse to shut up. In behavioral psychology, we track a highly critical biological resource known as cognitive bandwidth. Every single word you speak, every exaggerated story you formulate, and every facial expression you force to keep the spotlight requires an immense, unsustainable amount of neurological processing. When you constantly project your voice and frantically monitor the micro-expressions of the room to see who is validating, you are literally bleeding your cognitive energy dry. You are dangerously redlining your prefrontal cortex. This is precisely why loud people often crash into severe, unexplainable depressive states the very second they return home and are left completely alone. They are not genuinely energized by human connection. They are running on toxic, cortisol-driven adrenaline spikes. You have mathematically dysregulated your dopamine receptors by turning every basic human interaction into a desperate, exhausting performance for external validation. Because you have successfully depleted your own brain trying to remain the center of attention, your biological baseline for emotional regulation violently drops to zero. You completely lose the ability to actively listen. You lose the ability to process complex social cues. You become entirely blind to the actual psychological dynamics happening right in front of you. While you are busy performing your loud persona, the quiet, highly regulated Stoic individuals in the room are running clinical behavioral algorithms on you. They see exactly how desperate you are for their approval. They watch your fake confidence immediately fracture the moment someone challenges your opinion or simply looks away. You have not achieved alpha status or social respect. You have mathematically manufactured extreme vulnerability. You have trained your nervous system to become functionally dependent on the applause of strangers. You are entirely externalized, living entirely outside of your own control, which is the absolute biological antithesis of Stoicism. Are you truly confident or biologically terrified? You must force yourself to answer a brutal, highly uncomfortable question right now. Are you truly confident, or are you simply biologically terrified of the silence? Modern pop psychology has given weak individuals a highly profitable, socially acceptable excuse for their profound inability to tolerate quiet moments by comfortably labeling them as extroverts. But the clinical, biological truth is entirely different. Compulsively filling every quiet moment with the sound of your own voice is never a display of social intelligence. It is pure primal cowardice. It is a desperate, transparent attempt to outrun the terrifying reality of your own internal thoughts. Over 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus stated, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This is not just an ancient philosophical proverb, it is a highly calibrated biological blueprint for unshakable emotional dominance. When you possess genuine, deep-rooted Stoic confidence, you have absolutely zero biological need to announce your presence. You do not need to dominate the decibel level of the room because you already own your internal psychological territory. You can sit in absolute stillness while someone else speaks, completely unmoved and unbothered by their desperate attempts to flex, boast, or show off. You do not feel threatened by another person taking the spotlight because your self-worth is generated entirely from within. Retreating into a loud, performative persona, the exact moment you feel slightly insecure, is a massive escape hatch for a mind that is simply too weak to handle self-reflection. You are actively constructing a psychological echo chamber where the sound of your own voice drowns out the terrifying realization that you have absolutely no control over your own nervous system. You are a biological slave to the room. You will absolutely never hear this clinical reality from mainstream online therapists, modern self-help influencers, or popular communication gurus. Because teaching you to be loud, aggressive, and constantly fighting for social attention is the foundational backbone of a multi-billion-dollar personal branding industry. This is the carefully hidden behavioral architecture that true Stoic thinkers understand intimately, while the fragile masses exhaust themselves screaming for validation. If you do not master this exclusive biological reality in the next 2 minutes, you will remain highly profitable prey for a societal matrix that actively monetizes your insecurity. You simply cannot afford to miss how your own desperate desire to be heard is actively destroying your psychological leverage. Why do true Stoics use silence as a cognitive shield? Let us examine the exact framework true Stoics use to protect their nervous system. A master of Stoic fortitude understands that psychological data is the ultimate currency in any social dynamic. When you are loud, you are freely giving away highly sensitive data points about your ego, your deepest insecurities, your desires, and your emotional triggers. You are effectively handing the entire room the absolute keys to your psychological cage. True Stoics use silence as an impenetrable cognitive shield. By remaining completely quiet, they absorb all the behavioral data in the room without giving away a single piece of their own. They silently study the behavioral patterns of the loud, dysregulated individuals. They watch exactly where the insecurities lie. They conserve their cognitive bandwidth and protect their dopamine baseline while the rest of the room willingly bleeds it out. This deliberate, silent observation creates a massive asymmetry of psychological power. The primitive human brain simply cannot process someone who is completely comfortable in silence. It triggers a subconscious respect and a deep biological sense of intimidation. When you refuse to react emotionally, when you refuse to perform for the crowd, and when you maintain heavy, unblinking eye contact without uttering a single word, you create a massive vacuum of power. The loud, insecure people in the room will desperately rush to fill that vacuum, over-explaining themselves, apologizing, and revealing their weaknesses while you remain entirely unbothered. You are not suppressing your authentic voice, you are executing high-level emotional regulation. You are simply refusing to waste your neurochemistry on people who have not earned your words. You are replacing the fragile illusion of fake confidence with actual biological composure. How does society exploit your need for validation? Let us dissect exactly how this biological weakness is ruthlessly weaponized against you in the real world. Psychological predators, highly toxic individuals, and manipulative social climbers absolutely love loud people. To someone who understands human behavior, a loud personality is the equivalent of a bleeding target. They immediately recognize that your nervous system is entirely dependent on external validation to feel safe. Once they know you need their applause, their laughter, or their agreement to feel secure, they own you. They control your dopamine supply. When a manipulative individual observes your desperate need to be heard, they do not argue with you. They do not fight you for the spotlight. They simply use tactical silence. They intentionally withhold the validation you are actively craving. When you finish a loud, exaggerated story to impress the group, they will look at you with a blank, unamused expression. Instantly, your dysregulated nervous system panics. Your cortisol spikes. Because you cannot tolerate the silence, your brain forces you to start talking faster. You begin over-explaining yourself, backpedaling, or revealing highly sensitive personal information just to fill the void and win back their approval. You completely surrender your emotional autonomy. They did not have to overpower you, outsmart you, or attack your character. They simply let your own fake confidence collapse under the weight of its own biological unsustainability. You willingly walked into their psychological trap, handed them your leverage, and destroyed your own stoic baseline because you refused to keep your mouth shut. The mathematical cost of your inaction today is absolute and unforgiving. Your profound inability to control your own mouth and endure silence is actively destroying your social capital, your self-respect, and your mental resilience at this exact second. Every single time you overcompensate with a loud persona, you create a compounded psychological debt that you will be forced to pay back with severe anxiety and total loss of status tomorrow. You have less than a minute to completely reprogram this cognitive failure before your fake confidence is permanently shattered, your biological weakness becomes public knowledge, and your identity is entirely erased from the Stoic matrix. Listen closely to the final blueprint. How to build true Stoic fortitude through silence. You have to break this biological code immediately. You must forcefully stop using the highly marketable label of the extrovert to hide your profound biological fear of irrelevance. If you want to develop impenetrable psychological resilience and command true, undeniable respect in every room you enter, you must willingly step into the agonizing discomfort of absolute silence. You must stop performing for people whose opinions do not dictate your survival. The next time you walk into a social gathering, a tense conversation, or a chaotic environment, execute a deliberate neurological reset. Do not announce your presence. Find a seat, plant your feet firmly on the ground, and do not speak a single word unless you are directly spoken to. Notice the massive spike of adrenaline in your chest. Notice the primal, burning urge to crack a joke, tell a story, or interject an opinion simply to prove your worth to the tribe, and simply let that urge die. Do not react to it. Stay in the fire of the silence. Watch the loud people in the room completely exhaust their nervous systems. Study their micro-expressions. Train your amygdala that you do not need external validation to survive. Teach your nervous system that your existence is inherently valuable without a single word being spoken. This is the clinical application of Stoic fortitude. This is the only legitimate path to true emotional intelligence and unshakable internal power. Anything else is just a highly profitable delusion sold to you by an ego that is absolutely terrified of being forgotten. The psychological trap of the loud personality is absolutely real, but now you possess the exact clinical blueprint to dismantle its walls brick by brick. You are no longer blind to your own biological cowardice, which means you no longer have any excuse to remain a voluntary slave to your own noise. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to master your primal psychology before the toxic individuals in your circle use your loud insecurities to completely destroy your peace. Check the resources in the description to actively rebuild your cognitive framework from the ground up and start operating like the top 1% of true Stoic thinkers.